This is Random Thoughts, and in this video, I'm going to talk about something that maybe we don't think a lot about, and these are thoughts that came to me as I was exploring the subject of slavery. And whenever I read documents about slavery in the past, especially books and other forms of documents, of course, it seems to me that people who lived through slavery, and here I'm talking about the slaves themselves and the owners of the slaves, and then the larger societies. They didn't see slavery as a problem. They didn't see it as an evil thing. To them, it seemed like it was part of how human society functioned, and it was an acceptable way of existence for everybody. Um, and that is interesting to me because we now look at slavery from a very different perspective. And another history that also made me question or have these thoughts is colonialism. I'm still reading the diary of Richard Maynard Sargent, a British officer who came to Kenya in 1902 and led various expeditions, including one where Koitalel Arap Samoei was killed. And when I read this diary, there are so many terrible things that are happening in that diary, especially to the black people, the people who are on this land. And that includes these strangers coming in, and they feel they have the moral right to just force these tribes of people to start living in a different way than how they had been used to live. And they forcing them to acknowledge them as their overlords and punishing them when they show any little form of rebellion, taking their cattle, tens of thousands of cows and hundreds of thousands of sheep and goats, killing them at the slightest provocation. A lot of what you can today describe as crimes against humanity were done during the colonial period. But when you try to look at the mindset of the people who were carrying out these atrocities, to them, they didn't see anything wrong with it. To them, it seemed like it was something necessary that needed to be done. And it was even good to the natives, as they call them. And even the natives, the so-called natives, to some extent came to accept that was acceptable, or they came to see it as it was something that was inevitable, and the white man had some right, or some, we can even call it divine responsibility, to come and bring education and development to the black person. Now, slavery, colonialism, and there's other things that we can see we can even talk about in some texts, sacrifices of even humans in some societies. And to us, it's horrible, of course. But the people who lived during that time, it looked like it was normal and it was okay and it was acceptable. And that led me to asking myself this question. And I ask myself this question because I've come to conclude that there is no generation that is special. Different generations are different, but not actually special. So I ask myself, are there things that are happening today in the world, in modern societies, in our societies, that in 100, 200, 300 years to come, the people in that generation will look back and wonder, how did such atrocities allow to continue to happen? Are there such things? I think there are. There are things that we do today, or that people do today, or some entities do today, that to us look normal and okay and acceptable. But I think in 100 to 100 years, people will be looking back at our societies and they will be wondering, how was that even allowed to happen? And I can give you a few examples. I can give you two examples. I think one of the things that are happening today that may turn out to look like huge crimes against humanity is what the food industry is doing today, processing food and the marketing of terrible food and the teachings or giving humans or people wrong understanding of how their bodies work and the food they eat and how everything works. And all this information is packaged in a way that is just about selling and making more money out of the populations. And the food goes from farming to processing to marketing. There's a lot of things that are happening there that nobody cares about what those foods are going to do to the health of the people. People are eating junk that is making them sick and unhealthy, and nobody is concerned today. Or a few people are making noise, but it's no big deal. Everybody's taking sugars in large quantities and things like that. And I think in future, people will look back and wonder how were few organizations allowed to just hurt people with terrible food and terrible ideas about food, and it was allowed to happen like that. Another one is the medicine, healthcare. I think today there are things that are happening that we accept, like it's how the system works and it's how everything works. There's no any other way things can happen. But maybe in 200-300 years, people will look back and will be like, why? Those were crimes against humanity. So anyways, so those are thoughts that emerged in my head as I look at history, and I'm wondering, there's no way that our society is special, is unique. Because when you look at history, you go through texts maybe 1,000 years old, 1,500 years old, 300 years old, and you look at these different societies, and especially when you find records that give you the day-to-day existence of the people, then you come to realize we are not any different from these people. But of course, there are specific phenomena that were used to happen during their time that we don't have. Slavery is one example, and colonialism is another. But then you ask yourself, is it possible that our societies are perfect today, that there is nothing that will be looked at in future and it is really terrible, like we look today back in the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, and maybe even 1000 or 500 BCE, and we wonder why was that even allowed to happen? Is there nothing like that that will be found in our modern societies? So yeah, those are my random thoughts.